Всім добрий вечір.
On behalf of the brave, on behalf of every father and every mother who waits for freedom, on behalf of our warriors, and paves the way for a new history.
Hello and welcome to Tochnyi Weekly, the show that gets behind the headlines to discuss the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have a good broadcast for you this week. There's a lot of little pieces of news, so we'll do our best to sort through it all for you and try to come up with something coherent about what happened this week. So if you could, please do hit the like and subscribe button. It all really helps us out, helps the algorithm. YouTube is not super fond of us because we like to show explosions and other things involving war, and YouTube doesn't like that. It's not advertiser friendly. So we really appreciate all your direct support. Really counts a lot towards making us visible at all in the YouTube space. So thanks, guys. Also, we have a Twitter and Blue Sky account for social media. That's where we post updates about little things. So yeah, if you want any extra updates from Tochnyi, it's a good place to check. And then lastly, we have our website, tochnyi.info. Last but not least, because of course there's a lot going on the website. We have articles from a lot of very dedicated researchers who spend a lot of time putting together very precise, well-sourced information. So if you're interested in some of the topics we cover on the stream, but you want a little bit more depth and a little bit more sources, then the website tochnyi.info is a good place to look. There's also a lot of interactive maps and other cool stuff there. So tochnyi.info. Okay, so this week I will go ahead and start with the news. Then we'll have a report from German aid to Ukraine. I'll cover a few extra things that are just like, random things. Then we'll talk to Standomir about the current state of the Russian economy. And then we'll have a Q&A. So if you guys have any questions in the chat, you're more than welcome at any time to put your question up, and we'll do our best to address all the questions toward the end of the stream. So without any further delay, I will jump into the news. These are the main headlines as of June 29th, 2025. First up, we have operations. Ukrainian military and security forces carried out a joint operation targeting a key Russian airbase located in the Volgograd region, approximately 900 kilometers from Ukraine's border. The action, led by Ukraine's Special Operations Forces in coordination with the Security Services of Ukraine, or the SSU, focused on the Marinovka, also referred to sometimes as the Marinivka airfield. According to Ukrainian military communications, 4 Russian Su-34 fighter bombers were affected in the strike. 2 were heavily damaged, and 2 others sustained lesser impacts. These aircraft are known for their role in launching precision-guided munitions along active combat zones. Ukrainian forces also reported inflicting damage on infrastructure essential for the airbase's functionality, including areas used for aircraft maintenance and logistical support. These facilities were reportedly active, with Russian personnel at the time engaged in preparing and servicing aircraft for operational deployment. There is no currently independent verification of this report. In a previously undisclosed operation, Ukrainian and Polish security agencies jointly disrupted a planned attack on Ukraine's president during his visit to an airport in southeastern Poland. The operation, which took place last year, was revealed by Lieutenant General Vasyl Maliuk, the head of Ukraine's security services. During a private meeting with select media, he explained that the would-be attacker was a Polish national and military pensioner who had long harbored Soviet loyalties. Ukrainian intelligence had reportedly identified the individual as having been recruited many years earlier and recently activated to carry out the violent action against the president. The plan involved targeting the president upon his arrival at the airport, with options including a sniper attack or the use of an FPV drone. The Polish airport serves as a strategic hub for both diplomatic traffic and military logistics between Poland and Ukraine. The Polish Internal Security Agency, working closely with the SSU, intervened and prevented the attempt. Maliuk publicly acknowledged and expressed appreciation for the ABW, the Polish Security Services, collaboration in disrupting what he characterized as a serious external threat. Earlier this year, Polish officials disclosed the indictment of a man identified as Pavel K., who was accused of collaborating with Russian intelligence services. According to prosecutors, he had agreed to provide logistical and security details about the airport to aid in planning an attack on the Ukrainian head of state. His arrest was based in part on intelligence provided by Ukraine. Maliuk also outlined a separate case uncovered in May of 2024 involving 2 Ukrainian State Security Administration colonels who were allegedly recruited by the Russian FSB's so-called Fifth Service. These individuals had been gathering intelligence and attempting to coordinate a plan to strike during the president's movements near the presidential office. The plan reportedly including using missile strikes against a building where the president was believed to be staying, followed by the use of drones to target any remaining individuals, with a second missile intended to eliminate evidence of drone activity. Ukrainian intelligence teams had been monitoring this internal threat for nearly 2 years, using both technical surveillance and infiltration methods to gather evidence and ultimately prevent the plan from advancing. Ukrainian authorities narrowly prevented a major bombing attempt targeting the headquarters of the security services of Ukraine in Kyiv. The plot involved transporting a suitcase containing 7 kilograms of explosives packed with shrapnel directly to the entrance of the agency's main office on Volodymyrska Street. The attempt was thwarted thanks to surveillance and intervention by Ukrainian counterintelligence units, who detained the individual responsible, a young woman, just before the device could be activated. According to the SBU, the operation was coordinated by Russian intelligence services, specifically the GRU and FSB, acting under covert Kremlin directives issued in 2023. The classified order tasked Russian operatives with executing a broad campaign of destabilizing actions across Ukrainian territory under the pretext of creating, quote, diversionary noise. Ukrainian security forces had been monitoring the suspects involved in the preparation phase of the attack. The original plan anticipated a male operative receiving the explosive device from an accomplice. SBU teams were instructed to track the exchange closely, with orders to allow the operation to proceed up to a certain point in order to gather further intelligence, only intervening when the threat escalated. Unexpectedly, a young woman took possession of the bag and was observed entering a taxi that looped through the city before stopping directly outside the SBU's known headquarters. She then attempted to deliver the suitcase to the building entrance, unaware that the agency had long since relocated its staff and operations from that location due to persistent security concerns. The explosive, had it detonated, would have caused widespread casualties due to the volume of shrapnel contained in the device. He also clarified that while the symbolic target was the SBU headquarters, the real risk was to civilian bystanders and personnel near the site. The arrest and confiscation of the device are being treated as part of a broader investigation into ongoing Russian efforts to destabilize Ukraine through covert actions. On June 22nd, Russian forces conducted a missile strike against a temporary Ukrainian military training site used by a mechanized brigade in the southern region of the country. Ukrainian ground forces confirmed the incident, reporting that 3 personnel lost their lives and 14 others sustained injuries. The strike occurred while training exercises were in progress. According to Colonel Vitaly Sarantsev, who oversees communications for Ground Forces Command, the site was not a permanent facility. It was designed for a specific short-term exercise, and soldiers were not stationed there full-time. Preliminary assessments suggest that the attack involved an Iskander-M ballistic missile. Most of the unit had moved to cover shortly before the missile impact, having responded to an air raid alert. However, a number of individuals failed to follow the established safety procedures in time, which accounted for the majority of the injuries. Sarantsev emphasized that the avoidance of greater losses was due to the rapid implementation of security protocols once the alert was issued. A formal investigation is underway, with a special commission examining the details of the incident. Law enforcement and military personnel are on site, and additional precautions are being implemented to address the risk of further strikes. Up next, we have economy and aid. The Dutch government has announced a new military assistance package for Ukraine valued at 175 million euros as part of a broader security strategy to strengthen Ukraine's defensive capabilities amid ongoing Russian attacks. Dutch Defense Minister Ruben Brekelmans confirmed that the package will include radar systems, various unmanned ground and aerial vehicles, and additional drone technologies. A significant portion of this support involves contracts signed between the Netherlands and Ukrainian defense manufacturers for the production of 600,000 drones. This initiative is part of the larger Drone Line project aimed at scaling up Ukraine's capacity for both surveillance and combat drone deployment. Deliveries from these contracts are expected to begin within the year. Ukrainian defense forces have formally introduced the Protector unmanned ground vehicle into operational use, marking a significant step in the country's integration of automated systems into the battlefield. Developed by Ukrainian Armor, the platform was created in collaboration with frontline units to address real-world operational demands under diverse terrain and weather conditions. The Protector is a heavy unmanned logistics and combat support vehicle capable of performing a wide range of roles, including transporting ammunition and supplies, evacuating casualties, carrying remote-controlled weapon systems, and supporting electronic warfare missions. It features a payload capacity of up to 700 kilograms and a 400-kilometer operating range. Powered by an internal combustion engine and built with all-wheel drive and run-flat tires, the vehicle is optimized for cross-country mobility, including traversing water and obstacles. Honestly, I included this one. Ukraine debuts a lot of drones every week, but this one, to me, most resembles like a standard military truck. So I thought it was kind of interesting that it's an unmanned vehicle. According to the CEO of Ukrainian Armored Vehicles, the Protector is also capable of transporting several smaller ground drones, each weighing between 50 and 150 kilograms, to positions near the front line, typically within a 2 to 3 kilometer radius. These support drones can be used for roles such as reconnaissance, mining, or strike missions. The UGV preserves their battery life and reduces exposure during transport. Development of the Protector began in mid-2023 following a request from a frontline brigade in the Donetsk region. The unit had been one of the first to deploy ground-based robots for direct action and engineering purposes. The project was guided by direct input from operators and the brigade's leadership, resulting in Ukraine's first domestically developed heavy unmanned logistics vehicle. The vehicle can be equipped with weapon systems to target enemy forces or lightly armored vehicles, adding a combat role to its logistics function. Ukrainian Armor emphasizes the Protector's cost efficiency and scalability, although specific production numbers and pricing figures have not been released to the public. Ukraine has secured a $190 million financing initiative under the DRIVE project, delivering resilient infrastructure in vulnerable environments, a joint initiative with the World Bank supported by funding from the government of Japan. The Prime Minister of Ukraine announced the development, emphasizing the project's role in reinforcing the country's infrastructure resilience amid wartime conditions. The funds will be issued as a loan by the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development and will be allocated to critical infrastructure priorities. These include bridge restoration, road system modernization, transport network improvements, and overall reinforcement of Ukraine's road and logistics sector. According to Shmihal, the DRIVE project is specifically structured to develop sustainable infrastructure capable of withstanding the strain of ongoing war and regional instability. The initiative is part of a broader effort to ensure that Ukraine's transport and mobility systems remain operational and secure during wartime, while laying the groundwork for a post-war recovery. Australia has expanded its sanctions regime against Russia by adding 37 individuals and 7 entities to its official blacklist, according to a statement from the country's Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. The newly sanctioned parties are now subject to financial restrictions and travel bans as part of Australia's response to Russia's ongoing military actions in Ukraine. Among those targeted are senior figures connected to major Russian state-linked companies and institutions. These include board members Sovcomflot, Gazprom Neft, Gazprom Bank, and Rustam Minikhanov, the head of Russia's Republic of Tatarstan. In addition, sanctions have been extended to several public figures and media personalities associated with Kremlin-aligned narratives or state-backed propaganda. These include the singer Yaroslav Dronov, known by the stage name Shaman, television presenter and athlete Maria Kiselyova, Aram Gabrielnov, the founder of the Life Project and head of the New Media Publishing House, and a bunch of other people we don't know. The 7 newly listed entities include Soglasy Insurance, Micron, a major electronics company, Baikal Electronics, and Minitek, all of which are believed to support or enable Russian defense, surveillance, or cyber capabilities. The European Union has officially extended its sectoral sanctions against Russia for another 6 months, following approval by the committee's permanent representatives on June 27th. These sanctions target entire Russian industries and key economic sectors, including finance, trade, dual-use technologies, transport, industrial goods, and luxury items. The extension follows a political agreement reached by EU leaders on June 26th, although no consensus was reached on adopting the 18th new sanctions package. According to diplomatic sources, efforts to pass the next round of sanctions were blocked by Hungary and Slovakia. They made a friend. While Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has consistently opposed sanctions targeting Russia, Slovakia's position is a shift. The Slovak foreign minister stated that Bratislava would only support the new sanctions package if the EU provided specific guarantees and assistance to offset the economic fallout from halted Russian energy supplies. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico also pushed for a delay in adopting new sanctions until a decision is reached on the Repower EU, the EU's initiative to phase out dependence on Russian fossil fuels by 2030. The proposed 18th sanction package, introduced by the European Commission in June, included further measures against Russia's energy and banking sectors and covers transactions related to the Nord Stream gas pipeline project. However, due to unresolved objections from both Slovakia and Hungary, the package was not adopted. An EU official noted that ambassadors will revisit the matter once the two objections are addressed. Despite the deadlock on the new measures, the extension of existing sectoral sanctions ensures continued pressure on Russia's economy. Ukraine is said to receive 42.5 million euros in international assistance to repair damage sustained by the new safe confinement structure at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, following a Russian strike on February 14th. Although the Shahed-type drone impacted the containment structure over the plant's destroyed fourth reactor, no significant radiation leaks occurred. The funding, announced during a meeting of the Chernobyl International Cooperation Account Assembly of Contributors at the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in London, will support both temporary stabilization efforts and long-term restoration of the arch. The structure, completed in 2017, was designed to contain radioactive material as a permanent replacement for the original sarcophagus built shortly after 1986. Contributions included $25 million from the European Commission, $10 million from France, and $7 million from the UK. Ukrainian Environment and Natural Resources Minister Svitlana Hrinchuk confirmed that structural assessments and initial preparation work have already been carried out, with 400,000 euros allocated in March from Ukraine's dedicated Chernobyl Response Fund to support the initial phase. The repair program will be conducted in stages, beginning with immediate structural reinforcement and moving towards full restoration of the arch's protective functions. The NSC remains a central component of post-disaster containment and radiation control efforts at the Chernobyl site, which still poses long-term environmental and safety concerns decades after the initial explosion. Kongsberg Defence and Aerospace, the Norwegian defense manufacturer known for producing the NASAMS air defense system, has officially opened a permanent office in Ukraine, signaling a significant expansion of defense cooperation between the two countries. Kongsberg's presence in Ukraine is expected to facilitate joint development projects focused on air defense, interceptor systems, and maritime defense. Umarov stated that Ukraine and Kongsberg are already working on new NASAMS-based solutions aimed at strengthening the protection of civilians and critical infrastructure. He noted that over 3,500 missiles and drones were launched by Russian forces in the past month alone. The announcement coincided with high-level discussion between Ukrainian defense leadership and Norway's defense minister as part of broader efforts to expand bilateral defense ties. Ukrainian drone manufacturer TAF Drones has finalized development of its last-mile automatic homing module and is preparing it for domestic mass production, following successful testing and compatibility with NATO standards and Ukrainian military requirements. The last-mile module is designed to enhance the precision and autonomy of unmanned aerial systems during combat operations. It enables drones to lock on and engage targets automatically, even if the operator loses control due to electronic warfare interference or other battlefield obstacles. The system integrates daylight, infrared, and thermal imaging to identify and track both stationary and moving targets, significantly improving targeting accuracy and mission reliability. According to TAF Drones, the module can maintain autonomous target acquisition and tracking in high-speed flight, with detection of stationary targets possible at speeds of up to 120 km per hour and tracking of moving targets by 60 km per hour, even under wind conditions of up to 10 meters per second. Static targets can be engaged with a precision of up to 1 meter from distances of up to 500 meters, while moving targets can be captured from around 150 meters. The system features intelligent trajectory correction, full mission abort capability, and EW resistance, providing drone operators with a reliable tool in complex and contested operational environments. Its modular design allows it to be installed flexibly on a wide range of UAV platforms, enhancing the ease of use and deployment in field conditions. Ukraine has increased its domestic drone production capability to 4 million units per year, according to the defense minister, who spoke at a press briefing on June 26th. This marks a substantial increase in industrial output as Ukraine seeks to bolster self-sufficiency in defense manufacturing amid continued uncertainty over foreign military assistance. As of the end of June, the Ukrainian Armed Forces had already received approximately 1.5 million drones, with the remaining volume expected to be delivered by the end of the year. This surge in domestic production aligns with Ukraine's broader strategy to prioritize unmanned systems across all combat domains. To streamline and decentralize procurement, the Defense Procurement Agency has launched the DoT Chain Defense Marketplace, a dedicated platform where military units can directly order drones and related equipment. Each brigade can select products based on operational needs, with payment and logistics handled by designated support organizations. Umarov emphasized that the marketplace model drastically reduces bureaucratic delays and speeds up fulfillment, allowing units to receive equipment up to 10 times faster than traditional procurement channels. While the Ukrainian government currently allocates around $60 million monthly to support direct procurement by frontline units, not all brigades have fully utilized available funds, largely due to a shortage of qualified procurement officers. The DoT Chain initiative is designed to address the gap by simplifying the purchasing process. Umarov stated that as of April 2025, over 95% of drones used by Ukrainian forces are produced domestically, highlighting a major shift toward localized defense manufacturing and sustained innovation in autonomous systems as a core element of Ukraine's defense strategy. President Zelenskyy has directed Ukrainian officials to prepare legislation introducing a long-term moratorium on business inspections, a move aimed at shielding entrepreneurs from undue pressure and promoting economic stability amid wartime conditions. The announcement was made during his speech at the State and Business Forum. Zelenskyy stated that the initiative is intended to protect businesses from harassment by corrupt or overreaching officials and to encourage growth in the domestic economy, which he emphasized as critical to national resilience during the ongoing war. The moratorium would apply broadly to inspections by regulatory authorities, furthering a wartime policy that initially suspended certain business regulations, including tax inspections, after the imposition of martial law. Although some oversight functions were reinstated in December of 2023, this new directive signals a reorientation towards easing administrative pressure on the private sector. In parallel, Zelenskyy announced the expansion of the Council for Entrepreneurship Support, aimed at strengthening dialogue between the government and business community and fostering a more favorable environment for Ukrainian manufacturing, logistics, services, and innovation. A Russian-linked oil tanker under multiple international sanctions, now operating under a fraudulent maritime registration, has entered Russian territorial waters via the Black Sea, according to analysts monitoring sanctions violations and maritime activity. The vessel, a 100,000-ton crude tanker named Sierra, previously operated under the name Suvorovsky Prospekt, what a Russian name, and was owned by Sovcomflot, Russia's state-controlled shipping company, until October 1st of 2024. The tanker is sanctioned by the United States, the European Union, and Canada due to its links circumventing sanctions on Russian oil exports. The vessel was escorted by the Russian corvette Boyki from the Mediterranean Sea to the North Sea on June 16th of 2025 before transitioning through the Baltic Sea and arriving in Russian waters on June 26th. Now flying the flag of Malawi, a landlocked country, the Sierra is part of a growing pattern of reflagging under open registries of countries with no maritime oversight capabilities. The registration was processed via a Dubai-based company and is considered fraudulent by the Malawian government, which has confirmed that the registry was not authorized. A Lloyd's List investigation found that nearly 300 vessels are currently using Malawi's false maritime flag, including at least 4 under international sanctions. This type of registry manipulation is common among the Russian Shadow Fleet tankers used to secretively transport Russian oil. Other landlocked countries like Mongolia, Bolivia, and Moldova have also been exploited for similar registration schemes. The flags are used to obscure vessel ownership and facilitate covert oil transport, especially to evade price caps and embargoes. Up next, we have international relations. On June 25th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and Alain Berset, the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, signed an agreement in Strasbourg to establish a special tribunal for the crime of aggression against Ukraine. The signing took place during Zelenskyy's first visit to the Council of Europe and followed formal authorization from the Council's Committee of Ministers. The tribunal is being created to hold senior political and military leaders accountable for the planning and execution of aggressive warfare against Ukraine, targeting individuals who would normally benefit from personal immunity under international law. The tribunal will have the authority to investigate and later prosecute such individuals after they leave office, bypassing the usual protections afforded to active heads of state or government. Unlike hybrid or domestic judicial mechanisms, this tribunal will possess international legal status, anchoring its legitimacy in existing international frameworks. Specifically, it will be based on Article 8 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, which defines the crime of aggression. It will also incorporate the UN General Assembly Resolution 3314, which outlines criteria for identifying acts of aggressive war. One key feature of the tribunal is that it may proceed in absentia, allowing it to issue judgments even if the accused are not present in court. This opens the possibility for prosecutions against members of the Russian political and military leadership, and potentially individuals from Belarus and North Korea, depending on their involvement and the evidence presented. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has once again placed the Russian armed forces on the United Nations list of shame for their widespread and systematic violations of children's rights during the ongoing full-scale war against Ukraine. The designation was included in Guterres' annual report on children in armed conflict, presented at a UN Security Council meeting in New York by Virginia Gamba, the Secretary General's Special Representative for Children in Armed Conflict. The report highlights a 105% increase in verified grave violations against children in Ukraine for the 2024-2025 period compared to the previous year. These include killings, injuries, attacks on schools and hospitals, all primarily attributed to the Russian armed forces and affiliated groups. Of the 671 documented casualties, 94 lost their lives and 577 were maimed, with 474 cases directly attributed to Russian military forces. The UN also recorded 862 attacks on educational and medical infrastructure, 559 against schools, and 303 against hospitals. The majority were attributed to Russian forces and their affiliates. Due to the scale, frequency, and deliberate nature of the violations, the Russian military remains listed among state entities responsible for grave breaches of children's rights as defined by international humanitarian and human rights law. This repeat inclusion on the UN's list of shame further isolates Russia diplomatically and may serve as a reference in future legal or accountability proceedings. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy held a nearly 15-minute meeting with former U.S. President Donald Trump on June 25th during the NATO summit in The Hague. Following the talks, President Zelenskyy described the conversation as both, quote, long and meaningful, emphasizing that they address key issues related to Ukraine's security and efforts to win the war. In a public statement via Telegram, Zelenskyy said the discussion focused on pathways to a ceasefire, prospects for achieving a durable peace, and measures to protect the Ukrainian population. He expressed gratitude for Trump's attention to Ukraine's situation and acknowledged a willingness to assist in efforts to bring the war to an end. While specific outcomes or proposals from the meeting were not discussed, Zelenskyy noted that further details would be made public at a later stage. And last item this week. On June 28th, Ukraine commemorated Constitution Day, a national holiday uniquely established by the Constitution itself. The occasion marks the adoption of the country's fundamental law in 1996, which laid the legal foundation for Ukraine as a sovereign, democratic state. The process of drafting the Constitution began after the Declaration of State Sovereignty was adopted by the Verkhovna Rada on July 16, 1990. This triggered the formation of the Constitutional Commission in October of that year. Over the next several years, multiple draft versions were produced by separate commissions under both the Parliament and the President, reflecting sharp political divisions and delaying progress until a consensus could be reached. Key points of contention included the balance of power, property rights, state symbols, the status of the Russian language, and the autonomy of Crimea. Left-leaning factions favored a weaker presidential system, state-managed property, and official recognition of both Ukrainian and Russian as state languages, while advocating to retain Crimean autonomy. In contrast, right-leaning forces, including representatives from dominant political parties and business circles, pushed for a strong presidential system, unrestricted private property rights, exclusive recognition of the Ukrainian language, and the removal of Crimea's autonomous status. Until 1996, Ukraine continued to operate under the 1978 constitution of the Ukrainian SSR, albeit with various amendments to reflect evolving national priorities. The breakthrough came on June 28, 1996, when after a marathon legislative session, the Verkhovna Rada adopted the constitution at 9:18 a.m. Kyiv time, with 315 MPs, a two-thirds majority, voting in favor. The document established a unitary state with strong presidential authority, enshrined the right to private property, confirmed the Ukrainian language as the sole state language, and recognized Crimea as an autonomous republic within Ukraine. The 1996 Constitution affirmed Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and commitment to human rights and democratic governance, while also reinforcing its legitimacy on the international stage. Since its adoption, the Constitution has undergone several amendments. However, the amendment process remains deliberately stringent. Changes require approval by 2/3 to 3/4 of all MPs, and any amendments that restrict fundamental rights, threaten territorial integrity, or undermine independence are expressly prohibited. Constitution Day thus symbolizes not only a legal milestone, but also an important moment in Ukraine's post-Soviet state-building history, highlighting the country's enduring struggle to define its governance model, national identity, and place in the global order since the collapse of the Soviet Union. And that's it for the main headlines this week. We will now move to the next.
Yeah, hello guys, that would be me. As always, I will now present this week's most important news from Germany regarding Ukraine. We are starting with some good news made public on Monday. The German Federal Agency for Technical Relief, THW, has handed over a new batch of humanitarian aid worth almost 130,000 euros to utilities in the Zaporizhia Oblast. Among other things, various generators, water leak detectors, sewage pumps, filters, and fire hoses were donated. In more detail, exactly 43 generators, 4 water leakage detectors, 6 sewage pumps, 6 suction filters, and 18 fire hoses. Now I want to mention 2 bits for which I don't have any visual material, so don't get confused by the intro screen. First, in a parliamentary answer published on Tuesday to questions by the parliamentary group AfD, the German government stated that it will contribute 30 million euros to the UK-managed NSA-TU Trust Fund to meet Ukraine's urgent equipment support and logistical needs. And second, on the same day, the federal cabinet has approved the second government draft for the 2025 federal budget. I know June is almost over, but we still don't have a budget. It includes roughly about 8.26 billion euros for the German Enable and Enhancement Initiative, through which Germany's military support for Ukraine is being financed, or to be more specific, the industrial deliveries. That's a plus of around 1 billion euros compared to the funding available so far. So that's good news at least. But it's about 900 million euro less than Minister of Defense Pistorius originally asked for and planned with. So yeah, real shame, to be honest. Now moving on to bits with visual material. Also on Tuesday, during a visit by a German delegation to a Ukrainian exhibition of captured enemy equipment, the German ambassador to Ukraine, Martin Jäger, formally handed over drone detection systems to the Ministry of Internal Affairs to protect critical infrastructure in Ukraine. I must say I'm a little bit confused because they say it's a formal handover and they didn't provide any details on the systems itself. So I don't know if or I'm guessing that the drone detection systems were really handed over at another time at a different place. And that they just meet for PR purposes, basically. And you guessed it, also on Tuesday, a lot of news on Tuesday, it became public knowledge that the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development is financing a new grant program of the IOM Ukraine to support Ukrainian entrepreneurs in the Sumy and Kyiv Oblast through the German state-owned development bank KfW. Employers from micro and small businesses receive up to $20,000 in funding for the creation of new jobs, through which the Ukrainian economy will be strengthened in the long run. And last but not least, also some very good news on Wednesday, not on Tuesday. The German Ministry of Defense mentioned in a publication on their website that the German government is supporting Ukraine with additional Patriot missiles, which will be delivered in the near future. According to the publication, Norway is supporting this project. I sadly can't give you any more details, at least not yet, but I'm researching on it. I already had some talks with a few people and a phone call with the Norwegian Ministry of Defense, and also sent out some emails. So I'm confident that it will be. I will know more about it in the near future, and I will, of course, update you once I get the infos. And yeah, that's it for my segment. So back to you, Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Germinade. So up next, we just have some other stuff that I wanted to talk about. It's not like mainline news items, but just kind of interesting little things. So the first is the NATO summit. I mentioned it briefly, but the main outcome of this, the tangible outcome, was a meeting between Presidents Trump and Zelenskyy that apparently went pretty well. I think Trump said something to the effect of like he couldn't have been nicer, which in Trump speak usually means it went well. So that was, I would say, the most tangible result. But generally speaking, I don't cover summits. There's usually like, these different arms conferences and things like that. But they're mostly vibes. Like usually things don't happen that are very definitive at those conferences. They're usually like repeating stuff they've already done, or they're, just talking. There's not a lot of like actual concrete action. And I do my best to like keep the vibes reporting to a minimum. Like, for example, this week, Canada talked about having a new sanctions package, but they didn't actually enact one. So while other, publications might talk about them talking about it, I think that's a waste of time until they actually do something. So usually I don't cover like summits and things, but I did want to just very briefly go over kind of this one because I think it had a couple of like implications for Ukraine. The first is, I'd say the general view of it was that it was positive for like Europe and Ukraine. I think that the general outlook was that it was possibly going to go bad. I don't know specifically what people envisioned happening, but the elephant in the room is kind of Trump, having a problem with NATO, basically. And I think that the organizers of the conference and all the countries involved were doing their best to kind of, tiptoe around that issue or like accommodate that issue. And I'd say the main thing that they did was they agreed to something that Trump proposed, which is that 5% of GDP military budget, goal. Obviously, it's not binding into any laws, but basically all the countries sort of agreed. They gave their word that they would do their best to meet that target. I don't think that was solely because Trump asked for it, but there's obviously real security concerns for Europe now. But it felt like a move to kind of mollify Trump a bit. It seems like that was largely successful. Trump, according to again the reporting about it, was relatively like positive about the whole affair, and that seems to have been a good thing. Like it seems like the NATO alliance is doing okay, aside from obviously the very deep political issues now that involve the views on NATO for the current administration. So yeah, I think that the summit overall was positive for Ukraine. More European military spending means probably more aid for Ukraine. And Trump had a very positive meeting, apparently, with Zelenskyy. Both Zelenskyy and Trump said that the meeting was very positive. It was about an hour. He usually meets with Putin for 2 hours, and I do think meeting length with that guy matters a lot, because I think that's the only time anything real happens with Trump, is when you have actual bilateral meetings between like him and another leader. So the fact that it only lasted an hour is like not super great, but it's still decent. He also had a call, I think, with Putin earlier this week, and he just kind of said, "Hey, you got to quit with this war stuff." Didn't really accomplish much as far as I could tell. So yeah, that was the NATO summit. Mr. Germinade, was there anything else about the NATO summit that you thought was important for what's going on in Ukraine?
No, not really. To be honest, it was a huge. I don't want to say time waste, because in general it wasn't a time waste, but in terms of Ukraine, disappointment was the word I was searching for. I mean, I'm not following really other countries, so I might be missing something. But the only thing, for example, I saw really was that the Netherlands, I don't know, did you talk about that? Sorry, Joseph, that the Netherlands has like announced to deliver like 20, I believe it's medevac vehicles from Rheinmetall. Did you talk about that?
No, not that specifically. There was a couple other things they mentioned, but yeah, you're right. They did do that this week.
Yeah, that was what I saw from the summit, and like the announcement that Germany will, support Ukraine with like Patriot missiles was another thing that was also just mentioned in like one single sentence in a whole press briefing. So it's like, yeah, doesn't matter. So yeah, the whole summit, in my opinion, in terms of Ukraine assistance, was really yeah, time waste.
Yep, I think I'd mostly agree. I think the vibes were good, but not much tangible happened, which is pretty typical for these summits. But it's better than a bad one, I guess. Okay,
Yeah.
so moving on, we have there was a documentary released this week about the human safari in Kherson, and I think other areas of Ukraine, but mainly Kherson. The documentary, anyway, and that was produced by Sabrina Zabirsky, who is a journalist who's working in Ukraine, and we've actually interviewed her in the past. So you can go to Spotify or go to YouTube and do a little search for Sabrina Zabirsky and Tochnyi. You should be able to find our interview with her. Very interesting stuff. We've had a researcher, Brendan, who has been working on this topic for like years now, and it's a very serious issue. It's Russians are deliberately hunting civilians in Kherson. They basically declared a certain area of Kherson like no one should be allowed to be there, and anyone who they see there, they attack with drones, and that includes elderly people, children, like anyone, any civilians, unarmed civilians. So yeah, they call it the human safari. The Russians do, and they talk about it on Telegram that they're doing this. So it's a really disturbing and horrible thing that they're doing. It's obviously a major crime against humanity, a major war crime. And yeah, it's any attention that can be brought to this topic, I think, is quite important. The city of Kherson definitely needs like support in terms of dealing with this issue. And so do other regions in Ukraine that are like this model that Russia has implemented in Kherson is expanding, I think. So yeah, Zarina does really good work. I would recommend everyone check out the documentary. And yeah, just do your best to like spread the word about what's going on with the human safari stuff. Mr. Germanade, do you want to say anything about the documentary or the topic?
No, not really. I'm the wrong person to talk to about this
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, we should probably get Brendan on at some point in the near
Yeah,
future.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like a lot of this stuff, I'm just kind of asking you, like, you got anything to say about it? And it's like, I don't know what you would say, but I figured I'd ask you.
I mean, it's of course it's horrible. It's good. It's kind of good and kind of sad, to be honest, to see that always the same people report about this. I mean, I know German media, for example, like report a lot about like Russian war crimes and all that kind of stuff. But in my opinion, the human safari is like one of the topics which doesn't get reported on like a lot by foreign media, and it's kind of sad to see that always the same people, have to talk about the same topic because no one else does, and it's good that they're doing that, but it's still sad news, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree with you. Once in a blue moon, Zarina gets a little bit of like mainstream media exposure, and they do like an interview with her or something. But generally speaking, I would say none of the mainstream publications, I would say even Ukrainian publications, are a bit lacking in this. Have like consistently worked to like spread information and like keep up to date on their reporting about this, because yeah, it's a pretty serious topic. There's a lot of stuff going on. Like Brendan, the guy who researches this stuff, he just has like thousands of news reports he's got to go through every day, and so it's like a difficult job to keep track of all this. And yeah, I'm not seeing any of the major media organizations willing to take that on. So yeah, Zarina and Brendan are doing really good work, like Germanade said, to like bring attention to this issue where a lot of other organizations currently aren't. Cool. Next topic is Serbia announces a complete halt to weapon exports. So just a little funny situation. So Serbia is known for having a somewhat like pro-Russian stance in general, like politically. It's a lot more complicated than that when you get down to the like reality on the ground. But that's like kind of their reputation historically. Then the Russian invasion of Ukraine happened. And I would say Serbia has like done everything they can to sort of be neutral in the sense that they politically aren't really behind like Ukraine, but they have a big arms industry, at least for the size for their economy, and it's very lucrative for them to export weapons to Ukraine. So they've been doing that as like much as they can. And the end result is that Russia's like constantly yelling at them for like sending artillery shells and weapons and stuff to Ukraine. So I don't know. I just thought it was funny that I don't know. Usually they do something to make Russia happy for a little while and they find some loophole to do it. So again, like right now they're saying they're going to completely halt weapons exports. I doubt it. Like, I don't think their economy could handle just a complete halt to weapons exports. It's a pretty important part of their economy, but we'll see. So this is their latest back and forth with Russia about this. Russia seems to have yelled at them enough about, artillery shells winding up in Ukraine for them to make this stunt that they've announced the full suspension of arms exports for now. So we'll see. We'll see if that holds. I think they'll cry uncle first. Okay, and then anything about that, Mr. Germany? I doubt it, but just thought I'd ask.
Yeah. I also, and to be honest, I'm a bit surprised. I mean, I heard about it, but I always thought that they just said, we're holding weapons export to Ukraine, and I was like, yeah, I mean, just export it to a different country, right? Which then transfers it to Ukraine, but completely that's not gonna work long term.
We'll see if it holds. Okay, next item. None of us are military experts, so unfortunately we can't get some really enlightened opinions on this. But we've seen a new type of Russian mad scientist tank on the battlefield. So of course, first we had the cope cages. Everyone laughed at the cope cages, but the truth is, drones are crazy, man. I do crazy things to protect myself from drones too, from the death robots that hunt me. So a bit of a desperate but understandable move, the cope cages. Then we saw the turtle tank. Mr. Daniela, one of our contributors, we did me and him, a little dialogue about the turtle tanks. And I think his general assessment of it has proven to be the case, which was that he said that the trade-offs are too much for what the turtle tank accomplishes, which is like not, the gains are not worth the costs in terms of like converting a traditional tank. And it's the same case if they were to make some kind of a specialized model. In other words, they've been fabricating these things like sort of improvisationally. These turtle tanks they just put like sheet metal around a tank, but if they were to create some kind of specialized tank, it wouldn't really be worth it. It would be too much money and so forth. So I think that that's proven correct, like Daniela's general assessment of the turtle tank, because we haven't seen them become common. And it seems like these new porcupine tanks are an attempt to like adapt that concept of the turtle tank, but to save on materials and maybe like improve the execution of it. So yeah, we're seeing now these porcupine tanks that have these there's other pictures of them. They either have these kind of lattices around them like that, or they have like rebar spikes sticking out of them. And it's pretty obvious that they exist to cause some kind of disruption to drone attacks on the tanks. Allegedly, according to Euromaidan Press, they are working in the sense that like it's harder for drones to take these kinds of tanks out than regular tanks. And Russia does have a really bad problem right now of tank losses. So I don't know. we like I said, we don't really have anyone here who I think has enough expertise on tanks to really speak to this matter specifically, or drones. But just an interesting development. Mr. Germinate, any thoughts on the porcupine tank?
Yeah, so like you said, I'm not a military expert. Thanks for the insult, by the way. Um, it's I don't know.
Filthy
It's
civilian.
Don't worry, I'm just joking. No, my best guess, and like I said, I'm not an expert, but my best guess is when you look at the like conventional tanks so far, like leaving out the turtle tank, but let's just say the usual like grill protection, putting reactive armor on the side and all the kind of stuff. You always have like completely or nearly direct impact on the vehicle, right? And with this kind of structure, I would say it's like when the drones are detonating, it's like we have a pretty big comparable distance to the vehicle from the blast itself to the vehicle, right? It's not directly on the vehicle or like 5 centimeters in front of it or 10 centimeters. It's like a meter or 2 meter in front or on top or whatever of the vehicle. So the blast can, you know, you know what I mean? Like not enforced directly on like one specific point on the vehicle, but like smooth it out on the surface. It's like I imagine like having a needle and punching it with a hammer like on a closed surface. You make a like a big hole in it, like a deep hole. But when you use something with much greater surface and hammer it, it doesn't like produce one specific very deep hole, but a small one with on a bigger surface. You know what I mean? The force can distribute much more. It's just my assumption seeing the image.
Yeah, I think that's right. And like the FPV drones, one of the things that makes them so deadly to tanks is traditionally, right, tanks mostly have to protect their side and maybe their front, right? And the theory is we can maybe lighten up the armor on the back a little bit, and we can definitely lighten up the armor on the top, because mostly they're going to be to fight other tanks, and mostly and maybe infantry with rockets, and mostly they're going to be dealing with attacks like on the front or on the side. So, but one of the things that anti-tank weapons have done historically is try to hit that roof part because it's much more vulnerable. And FPV drones are like the next evolution in that, where you can actually try to get into the engine grading, and you can hit some really vulnerable spots on a tank if you have enough precision of an FPV drone. So that's a big problem for tanks, and it's understandable to a certain degree that they're trying all kinds of crazy stuff to try to make the tanks more viable. I think obviously long term, like passive defenses aren't really going to do it for drones. Drones are just too crazy and too sophisticated. But you're probably going to look at you probably need some kind of active defense to like actually fight drones in the future. But for now, this is the stopgap that I think we're seeing. And yeah, I think this is, even though obviously it's not like viable permanently, it is probably an improvement over either nothing or the turtle tank. So although the turtle tank I think had a slightly different tactical purpose, I think they were putting people in the turtle tanks to move them. They were kind of making I don't know, makeshift like siege weapons or something. I don't know. But yeah, it's still kind of a similar thing. They're trying to protect from drone strikes.
The one thing which I don't understand about this like design concept is like the spikes on the top. I mean, the only purpose I would see is that when the drone flies like from on top, you want to detonate it so it doesn't directly detonate on the cage itself, but on the spikes on top, and then the force gets distributed on the cage and then only through the cage onto the tank. So it's like very minimal impact basically. But if that's the case, wouldn't it make much more sense to like bend the spikes on top inwards? So even if you fly at an angle and you have much higher chance that the drones are actually hitting the spikes instead of the cage itself.
Yeah, it's true. It might just be to like secure them. Like I don't know. This is probably pretty improvised. I don't know like how to put it exactly, but they probably didn't do the most professional job. So that might just be the best way to secure them on there. But yeah, I think you're right. Like what it feels like there's a better way to handle the roof situation. But anyway, who knows? Stanimir, did you want to say anything about the Russian porcupine tanks?
Well, from the economy side, Russian rebar is down to 46,000 rubles per ton. So you have to stimulate some demand. There's no one buying it.
Yeah, you got extra rebar lying around. They start getting ideas, I think. So, yeah, Russian porcupine tanks. Okay, up next, just kind of a funny story. There was a guy. I don't actually know what his title was, but he was a collaborator. He worked with the Russians, and one thing he did was he stole a bunch of animals from a zoo in the occupied territories. This has happened before. Like the Russians, they steal all kinds of stuff from the occupied territories, like animals and artwork, and they kind of loot the occupied territories. And this guy stole some animals, some lions, and this has happened before, where they stole animals and then the animals attacked them in the future. This guy who was responsible for stealing and secreting away some animals to the Russian side was attacked and lost his life in a lion attack. I'm reminded of that meme of the Ukrainian soldiers when something happens when fate takes out a Russian. They always have those Ukrainian soldiers standing there, and then they put a little hat on, the thing what took him out. And in this case, you'd put a little hat on the lion, I think, right?
Yeah, it's very sad story. It's very sad.
Yeah, it couldn't have happened to a better guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, just a funny little story. This next one, just like a quick little thing. I talked a little bit last week about a new Ukrainian effort to make a drone battalion that's like an all-female drone battalion. I just wanted to add a couple of other units that now are being organized. These are like features that Euromaidan Press did on like specialized units. So the first one is a rescue group. They're emergency medical evacuation group. Their main job is just to take people who are wounded on the front lines and get them stable and get them to medical facilities. So this is I think it's a battalion, and yeah, they're like, that's their job. That's their only job. They wait around on the back lines until they get a report of a serious injury and a need for an emergency evacuation. Then they jump into action. They're tasked with figuring out how to use drones to do that more efficiently and save more lives. So just an interesting little micro unit of the Ukrainian military. This is kind of something me and German Aid were talking about before the stream, was we see the evidence of this type of stuff in other militaries, like the American or the German military, but usually they kind of disperse these functions throughout the military units. Ukraine it's much more common to have them organize specialized battalions or companies or platoons for this stuff. So just kind of an interesting little quirk of the Ukrainian military, I think. And then the other unit is a weather unit. This is a platoon, and they are staffed mainly by meteorologists or other people that have now developed a passion for meteorology, and their job is to just very carefully monitor the weather patterns in order to optimize HIMARS strikes. So just a couple of interesting little units that were interviewed by the Euromaidan Press for having unique functions in the Ukrainian military. Cool. And then last one is Russia has once again postponed some military deliveries to India. So there was a large delivery. I want to say it's like $400 million worth of equipment or something like that. Maybe I'm thinking of the 400 number from S400 though. What is it? Does it say the amount? I don't know. It was a big, 5.4 billion. There you go. That's a lot.
400 million, exactly.
Yeah, I don't know where I came up with that number from S400.
I mean, the 0.4 is there, right?
Yeah, the
It's lost
0.4,
the
yeah,
other
yeah.
5 billion. Hello? Am I lagging out, or is just
Oh,
it
sorry.
lagging out?
Yeah, I muted. Yeah, so
Okay.
my bad. But yeah, the historically, Russia and India's military have had very close ties. The Indian military, I think, appreciates that the Russians have let them build a lot of the equipment. They like license stuff out from Russia and they build it themselves. And Russia has been very like open to that model. Whereas I think a lot of Western countries are a little bit like, no, our military secrets are precious. We're not going to let you like build your stuff in India. So India has historically really, and also just for like political reasons, has been a big customer for the Russian military. And this is, I would say, significant because the Russians have been consistently failing to deliver military supplies that were contracted before the war started. And to the point where India actually now has like a parliamentary committee that's supposed to investigate this and like figure out what's going on with their S-400s and other things. So I would say that Russia's failure to deliver stuff on time and of good quality has resulted in India being a lot more open to partnerships with other countries. So now they're partnering with, and they always have. I don't want to say that they exclusively used Russia before, but they're partnering. They're trying to supplement their decrease in reliance on Russia with partnerships with like Israel, the U.S., France. So another example of this is recently they said that they were going to procure Mirage aircraft from France instead of Russian aircraft, which is historically what they would have gone with. And presumably that's just because even if they ordered them, it's unlikely that they would get them in the next like 5 to 10 years. So yeah, I would say it's not purely a like altruistic decision from India, or like, they're not doing this because Russia's evil or something. They need military equipment in case bad stuff happens with China or whatever, and or Pakistan. And Russia's just proven to not be the most reliable partner in military exports right now. Stanimir, did you want to add anything about like the Russian arms industry or their exports to India in particular?
Well, India in the past has had problems with Russian exports, particularly, for example, the Russian MiG-29Ks were delivered with deficiencies for a carrier aircraft, such as landing gear has structural defects. So yeah, that's part of the trend where when it comes to more high-tech stuff, India has gotten burned more times than it's gotten good deals.
Yeah, I think we're seeing a pretty serious like reevaluation from the Indians about like the quality and the reliability of Russian contracts and equipment. And also, I think probably Ukraine too is I don't want to say that the Russian stuff doesn't work, but I think we've seen a much more accurate test of some of the Russian equipment, and it's been shown to maybe not be as good as they said it was on paper, something like that. Anyway, that wraps up my extra stuff I wanted to talk about this week. Lots of little topics. I guess everyone was a Israel-Iran expert last week. Most of that's faded into the background now, and people are starting to talk about other stuff again. So the next segment is Mr. Stanimir. So we have a lot of stuff going on in the Russian economy this week. Mr. Stanimir, I wanted to ask you about a few things, and then if you had any more general information, you can share with the audience. So first, we had a very interesting development, which is that Putin said that he would lower the defense budget. And this is a pretty major headline, even in like mainstream publications. So I just wanted you to elaborate on that. Like, what did he actually say? Is it true? Will it have any major effect on the Russian budget or Russian military capability in the near future? What's the deal with this lowering of the defense budget?
Well, he said it more in passing that in the future he is planning to lower the defense budget as NATO is expanding their defense budget. On the other side, however, we've heard things from the Russian finance ministry that the Russian defense budget might have to be cut because there's just not enough in the federal budget to sustain the current volume of spending. And we've also heard from Russian officials in the defense industry, like Rostech this week, that they're not profitable at the current level of payments for Russian defense procurement. So I think they've reached a limit after which they can't keep expanding the budget, and it's going to start naturally stagnating and then shrinking because there's just not enough money in the pot for everything.
Okay, so that seems reasonable. Like Putin said it in passing. It probably doesn't have any direct administrative results in the near term, but the economic reality of their budget is that they probably do need to cut defense spending at some point. So this is maybe a signal that Putin's preparing for a move like that and trying to soften the blow or guide the narrative around that. Would you say that's accurate?
More that he was saying it in passing. It's more that it's a culmination of everything that's been happening. He has started to think about a post-war state, and a post-war state requires him to cut the defense budget significantly.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Cool. And then kind of related topic, there was a story this week that a Russian supplier of microelectronics, let me get the name real quick here. They are Optron Stavropol. They make microelectronics for all kinds of stuff, mostly the Russian aviation, like the MiGs and stuff like that, the Sukhois. And they announced that they're bankrupt and they're going to have to shut down operations. And when asked why, the company's general director stated that the cost of producing one of their microelectronics pieces of equipment is about 5,000 rubles, but the Russian Defense Ministry has set a hard price cap of 2,600 rubles. So the Russian Defense Ministry is buying them at half the price they cost to make them, and this has obviously driven the company to bankruptcy because that's their main business. So I'm just wondering, I guess, Stanimir, if that's a common thing that's happening in the Russian defense industry right now, and is this, having an impact on the Russian economy as a whole?
It's been happening in the Russian defense industry since before this war. So when you look at the pre-war contract for Il-76 planes, specifically in the airplane industry, they were selling the planes. The initial contract was such that the company was losing something like 20 to 30% of the price of the plane was just a loss for the company because they had contracted to sell them at such a low price. We've also seen it with new airplane contracts that they have to constantly be adjusted so that the big companies don't get bankrupt because they're paid a lot less than the initial contract costs. For the last 3 to 4 years, for civilian aircraft, which is also impacted, the price of aircraft have gone up 2 to 3 times, whereas if they started building them at the initial contract price, the companies would be bankrupt within a year. Now, when it comes to trickling down to the components manufacturers, and there you have specific military commissions which set the size of the price of the goods for the contract, that's getting even worse. So I think in this case, it wasn't exactly 2 times higher. It was just, it was sold to the government at 2,600 rubles. And the last they were making per item was at something like 1,000 rubles. But that was enough over 2 years to accumulate. And we see also the rigidity of the Russian system, which didn't allow for them to go back and redraw that contract so that they're not losing. We'll see that even more because, as I said earlier, the head of Rostech was talking this week that the military industry has no profitability and it's operating on the verge of bankruptcy. So that is a common problem in the system. But he was saying it more to get cheap loans back to the industry than, for example, to help the little guys like the smaller company.
Gotcha. So it sounds like it's a combination of 2 things. One, the military has this very inflexible process where they basically just kind of arbitrarily demand people provide them things at certain prices. And the other problem is that they locked in these contracts at certain prices, and then because of sanctions or inflation or other external problems, the costs of manufacturing things increased a lot, and they weren't able to kind of update the prices, right? So it's kind of a combination of both those things.
Yeah, it has been plaguing the Russian defense industry, like I said, since well before the intensification of the war. It was happening in shipbuilding as well. But again, when it's bigger companies like the United Shipbuilding Corporation or the United Aircraft Building Corporations, they have actual ties to the Kremlin. They can move the levers and get an increase in prices. The smaller guys further down on the chain of logistics can't do that. They don't have the same pool.
Gotcha. And so, like, obviously, Russia needs microelectronics for their airplanes. They're just going to kind of accept this company getting folded up, and maybe they'll get acquired by another company. Like, what happens when one of these companies just decides to pack it in?
Well, usually it gets incorporated when a defense contractor goes under, it gets incorporated into the larger defense industry. That is the state-owned defense industry, if they can. So that's why a lot of companies have moved into the overall control of Rostec over time.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's like pretty much all they can do. So yeah, that's I guess just kind of the general situation with Russian defense companies right now. Kind of interesting. And then the last thing I want to talk to you about this week, Stanimir, and then you can talk about anything you want, is that the Russian like some stats came in. I'm sure you know the source of them much better than me, but once in a while Russia releases some stats, and they mentioned that they've hired nearly 50,000 foreign workers in 2024, and I would guess, I'm not sure, but I would guess that's a woefully inadequate number for the Russian economy right now, which is labor starved, and that they need to source foreign labor. So what's the current situation with like the Russian labor market, and are they making any progress in importing workers to deal with this labor shortage, or are they failing?
Well, on one hand, first of all, it's not a story about just 50,000 workers, it's 50,000 skilled workers in industry. So they have a specific quota for countries that require a visa to enter Russia. So these are workers from such countries. It's not the same as that's all the foreign workers that they got, because there's a lot of countries that have visa-free travel, and they have a patent system or certificate system for them that they can work on Russian sites. So those are still in the millions within the Russian economy. These are just 50,000 skilled, 47,000, I think, skilled workers, which are coming from countries where you require a visa. So in this case would be, I think, still Burma needs a visa, India needs a visa, Vietnam needs a visa for workers. And the entire quota for that was something like 156,000 for skilled and unskilled labor for several different industries. And out of that entire quota, even though the skilled worker quota was overfilled by 16%, the entire quota was covered by only 63 to 73%. So it wasn't fully covered. So they still need more workers, even from those with the specific program for the visa. One thing that they're doing is they're going to expand the quota for Indians to come and work on construction sites, because by 2040 they're going to need something like an additional 750,000 construction workers. And they're going to try to attract up to 40,000 more Indian construction workers. Currently, there are only 3,000 according to their system in the country working. The other thing they're going to do is they're going to expand the laborers from North Korea. So currently there are 16,000 of them, I think, completely in the construction sector, and they're going to expand them to something like 50,000. And they're very happy with their North Korean construction workers, because they can work 12 to 16-hour shifts with few breaks and 6 days a week, almost like a slave labor.
Yeah, and I mean, at least historically, like the laborers are sent to very isolated places, and they're under heavy supervision, and like most of the money, if not all of it, gets sent directly to the North Korean regime, right? So I mean, it effectively is slavery. They're held against their will in a foreign country, working 12-hour shifts 6 days a week, or even longer, for no money, right? I mean, basically.
Yeah, but this is the labor that Russia really needs. But again, we're talking about them needing hundreds of thousands in each specific sector, and they're going to attract tens of thousands for the next few years. So they still need more labor than that. But this is their new way of getting additional labor when they can't access for various reasons, the Central Asian republics that were from part of the Soviet Union before. Because that supply of free migrant labor has now dried up for a variety of reasons, included Russians growing more xenophobic over the last few years.
Right, yeah, because of, I guess, security concerns and other economic issues, the traditional source of Russian migrant labor, which is the Central Asian republics, is like less viable for them. So now they're looking to diversify this. I think, as you pointed out, this is maybe a not the best figure, but kind of a good figure to try to measure that. In other words, like we're probably going to see an increase in countries that have visa regimes because they're trading off with countries that didn't. But it sounds like they're still like woefully short of what they need, even with all the efforts they've made. Are they like do they have a policy in place, or are they making a good effort? You mentioned they're trying to like attract Indians into the construction industry. Are they doing that with like incentives, or like how are they trying to do that?
Increasing the quotas and setting up organizations to hire Indians within India and giving incentives to companies to use that quota. So for you, if you're a construction company, you might get tax incentives to use that additional quota rather than pay a lot more to attract domestic work from another site. And you're cannibalizing construction then.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah. So that's pretty much all the stories that I saw this week. I wanted to ask you about, Stanimir. If you had any other updates on the Russian economy you wanted to share with our good audience, you're more than welcome.
Yeah, so we should start probably with the industry reporting for May of 2025. And we got the data. So again, the Russian industry is growing its output again for another month. It's growing by 1.10% for 2025 when compared to 2024. But what's important is that the civilian economy is actually struggling. It's roughly 10% or 5%, or in the case of civilian automobile production, it's down 27%. And this week it became obvious what is actually keeping the Russian industry in a positive dynamic, and that is Russian defense procurement. So what was growing this week was by 55%, this month by 55%, grew the production of armored fighting vehicles and other combat vehicles, which is usually piled into the production of other vehicles in the Rostat statistics. And also we had a 21% growth in the optic and electronic production, which is usually guidance systems, drones, and the like. That's what's keeping growth there. But 21% for that sector is usually a lot below the usual 30% we saw last year. But the 55% for the armored fighting vehicles was really a big number, and it's probably a big delivery package for the Ministry of Defense that led to this increase, because we're actually watching what is being delivered and not the production over time. So they can build up a batch, and then when they deliver it and transfer it, that's when it gets added to the statistics. But again, without the military procurement and without the military industry, Russian industry is going to be in a recession already. And the other good thing, however, was that the production of finished metal goods, which is the proxy for the production of munitions, grew only by 4.4% in May. So we're seeing maybe a plateauing of this production and the limit of the Russian industry to expand and scale this type of production for the foreseeable future. Now, when it comes to the main news for this week for me was that Russian Railways is going to postpone the expansion of the Far East Railway. So they're going to invest only 110 billion rubles in 2025 versus the previous plan of 400 billion rubles. Now the expansion is going to be funded through the Russian state WebRF Bank. They're going to provide 500 billion rubles, and other commercial banks are going to provide investment for another 500 billion rubles. But this will happen until 2032. So a lot slower investment in expanding the loading capacity of the Far East railways and thus trade with China. What is interesting is that BAM Tunelstroj Most, the company that has been building the what was the B? The BAM line, the Baikal-Amur main line in Russia, which is one of the biggest parts of the Far Eastern Railway, is going to be again built by BAM Tunelstroj. It was created in the 1970s by the USSR to build the bridges and tunnels on the Baikal-Amur main line when they were designing it initially. Now it's controlled by a friend of Kadyrov, and it's going to be the primary receiver of this 1 trillion rubles in spending on the expansion of the railway line until 2032. When it comes to lending in Russia, in May, we saw that the credit card debt that is overdue for servicing by over 90 days grew to 575 billion rubles, and it's spread over 8.3 million credit cards. This is significant because in May 2024, it was only 426 billion rubles, and it was spread over 6.8 million credit cards. So more and more people are getting into more and more debt with credit card debt in Russia with the high interest rate. On the commodity side, we saw that the 17th package of the EU sanctions has actually had a significant impact on Russian oil shipments. So the cost now to ship Russian oil from their ports is going up by 10%. It's not insignificant given that Russian companies have usually had to pay this for the client to accept delivery. Also, Rosneft will partially stop producing oil at its Sakhalin-1 site in August 2025. That is due to maintenance, which is supposed to last 20 to 25 days. And in July, the output of the site will be lowered from 150 to 160 barrels, 1,000 barrels a day to 135,000 barrels a day. And then in August, like I said, it will be completely stopped. On the Gazprom side, Gazprom has announced that it will not pay dividends for 2024, even though accounting-wise it has a slight profit for that year, despite suffering huge losses. And Gazprom is struggling to find a way to actually sell the 60 billion cubic meters more that it's producing per year that it can't sell to any domestic or external partners. So currently it's building up inventory, and soon it will going to have to stop production at a lot of its sites just to cover this, just to not be overflown with supplies. However, if people think that Gazprom is going to start struggling significantly, I don't think that's the case because they've cut investment significantly, and they've also had a specific tax added to their tax bill that was something like 600 billion rubles per year. That was lifted last year to help the company. So the Russian budget will get a lot less money for Gazprom, but Gazprom itself will be financially relatively okay. Not in a great position, but in a so-so position, and not returning record profits, but just returning normal results, let's say. The other thing for Russia, Russian wheat sowing for 2025 has fallen to the lowest it's been in 10 years. That is primarily due to the low profitability of Russian wheat and the bad harvest in 2024. So for Russian wheat, people maybe don't know, but there's also an export duty. What they can do is to lower the export duty to stimulate more sowing. But overall, Russian farmers are operating when they produce wheat at 0 to 0.5% profitability. So for them, 1 or 2 bad years can devastate them. And Russian agriculture has been suffering significantly from this over the last several weeks, especially when the international price of wheat has gone down significantly. They can't find export markets for their wheat, and selling it domestically also is not that profitable for them. So we'll see what will happen over the next 12 months and how they'll handle the next cycle. The other thing that spooked Russians in the commodity sector was that Russian gasoline has again started to spike on the internal wholesale market, going close to 65,000 and 70,000 per ton for the A92 and A95 gasoline. This is due to the summer increase in demand that happens every year, and coupled with the prolonged maintenance cycle of the Russian refineries. Also, for January to May 2025, Russian refineries managed to export 2.5 million tons more gasoline than in the prior year. There is a ban on exporting gasoline, but large producers like refineries are exempted from this. And likely the Russian government is going to start asking refineries to reallocate more of their shipments to the wholesale market so that they can stabilize the price for independent gas station chains. And finally, when we have that China is actually increasing its supply of steel to Russia due to lowering demand domestically. So for January, May 2025, Russian exports of steel have grown 16% in monetary terms. Now, this is significantly problematic for Russian steel producers because they're already struggling to find export markets, and domestically, like I said earlier, the price of rebar is down to 46,000 rubles per ton. The price of other metal goods are also down, so they're going to start closing down parts of their productions. And at the same time, China is just dumping steel on the Russian market. What I expect that they'll do is they're going to introduce again duties on Chinese exports of steel to Russia, like they did with aluminum previously in 2024 to protect the domestic market. When it comes to construction, Russian cement production for the period of January to May 2025 decreased by 8%. And Russians are now buying apartments with finishing less often. That's because the primary market segment that had finishing most often was the cheapest segment of Russian apartments. And that is now not the dominant sector, the dominant segment of housing that's being sold because of the lack of mortgages to support it. The other issue is that also it's becoming more difficult to have proper finishing of apartments. And there's also high costs of the materials and the low availability of skilled labor within Russia within this subsector. Now, the interesting data points that I gathered for the last week. In May 2025, 91,200 new cars were sold in Russia. This is 11% lower than April 2025 and 28% lower than May 2024. However, this time it's not just the high interest rate that's to blame for this. It's also the lengthier holidays that they had this year. I think they had 4 holiday days within the week. So that added to the pressure on sales. The Russian automobile maker WAZ saw its sales in May 2025 decreased by 40%. And overall sales for it for 2025 so far have been 33% lower than the same period in 2024. Also, the Russian plywood market will grow a bit this year by 2.1% in terms of physical volume of output, and prices will go up by 10%. But I want to point out that in this market, the peak occurred in 2021, and it has been damaged so significantly that they don't expect to reach those levels before 2033. And finally, the fees for housing and communal services for this year in July will be increased by 13.4%. This is the highest increase in the last 10 years, and it's due to the lack of complete indexation in 2021 and 2022, where they skipped pricing in the full increase of the cost of housing and communal services and shifted some of the costs back to the sectors that were servicing these instead of pushing them to consumers. So now they're getting back to consumers these delayed costs. In terms of debt auctions this week, Russia had 2 debt auctions as it does every week, and they had a yield that was fairly similar, 15.24% and 15.22%. The first auction managed to raise 84 billion rubles, where the second auction managed to raise only 29 rubles. But again, for Q2, the Russian Ministry of Finance managed to acquire enough funds through debt issues. I think their goal was 1.3 trillion, and I think they're a bit over 200 billion above that goal. I'm going to publish a detailed chart that breaks down everything, and we have the figures that everyone can see along with the yields and the dates of the initial auctions. And also you'll be able to see how much money actually Russia received from these debt auctions, because we're just talking about the nominal value of the bond here and not how much Russia actually gets from it. When it comes to inflation, it stayed steady at 0.04%. Inflation for June so far has been 0.12%. We have just the last week of June remaining, so it's going to be a lot lower than June 2024. And inflation for the year so far is 3.68%. But like I keep saying, like a broken record, expect inflation to spike up in July because of the increase in utilities and housing and communal services tariffs. And I think that's it for more important Russian business news for this week.
Okay, thank you, Stanimir. So once again, if anyone has any questions, you can throw them up in chat. We'll now move to the Q&A section. So we'll do our best to answer all the questions that we see. Okay, so someone mentioned that they heard there's proof of Russian drone pilots starting to coordinate. A pack of 6 went in, 4 hit the vehicle, and 2 waited to hit the crew after they got out. Yeah, that's definitely common drone tactics. Russians have sometimes good drone tactics that we see. They definitely learn. They definitely are improving their drone technology and tactics, just like Ukraine. I haven't seen any particular stuff this week about any special things they're doing to coordinate differently. But yeah, this is like a pretty common tactic for both Ukrainians and Russians. I remember Daniela, this is like years ago when he was doing his quantitative FPV research, both for Ukraine and Russia. He mentioned that it takes about 3 drones in any given situation to take out a vehicle, like minimum. So yeah, it wouldn't be unusual to have them have 4 dedicated to hitting a vehicle, and then this having the 2 extra to hit the crew after they get out would be a good luxury. I would guess that in general, that's probably not feasible for every situation to have 6 guys on a drone team coordinating for every little thing. But probably in a big, attack, you want to do something like this. Like the more people you put on a task like this when it comes to those drones, the more likely you are to have a successful operation. So yeah, it's definitely true that there's increasing coordination and that there's increased numbers of drones and there's better technology, and all of this combines to where they start trying to deploy these coordinated tactics where they have large numbers of drones that each one has a specialized task within the operation. Anyone have anything they want to add about that?
Nope.
Yep. Have you guys seen anything about like special like Russian drone tactics that they've shifted recently?
Nope.
Yeah, me neither. But yeah, it's definitely a thing. Just because no one's writing about it doesn't mean it's not happening. Cool. Next comment was that the FPV drone is equipped with a shape charge, or if it is, then it needs to explode directly on the main armor, and if it explodes 1 meter away, it will have no effect.
That was in relation to our discussion.
Yeah, that's right, about porcupine tanks. Yeah, as far as I know, that's basically accurate. A lot of these FPV drones have shaped charges. Shape charges basically work by directing the explosion into a very specific shape, and that shape is sort of a cone that's about 1 meter long. It shoots like a jet of hot metal into the armor in order to penetrate it. And yeah, these things are somewhat sophisticated. Like obviously, it's a little more complicated than a traditional explosive, but you have groups that improvise IEDs with these shape charges. So it's not that sophisticated of a technology, but you do, as mentioned, have to get real close in order for it to be effective. So that's one reason the drones are so good. You can get a shape charge directly where you need it in order to really disable a vehicle. But yeah, it's that's as far as I know true. A lot of these FPV drones do use shaped charges, and it would be beneficial to have a big old porcupine armor on your tank in order to keep that shaped charge as far away from the actual armor as possible. So yeah, that's effect basically true. Any comments, Mr. Gao?
Nope.
Yep, shaped charges, big thing used in FPV drones and all kinds of anti-armor weapons. Cool. And then most anti-tank rounds have delay timers on the explosive. Yeah, that's true. Don't really need to get too much into that. Is this because of automatic target recognition by the drones? I'm not sure what that's exactly in reference to, but the drones do have increasingly automated target recognition. Allegedly, the Ukrainians for a long time spent a while trying to get this, what they call the last mile technology to work effectively. They found that wasn't an area where they were making very fast advancements. Instead, what they did was they used, basically AI or machine learning, whatever you want to call it, to enhance other aspects, basically to make it easier for a novice to learn how to use a drone effectively faster. And that was very easy to do with the technology we had available now. But now that we're in the year of our Lord 2025, it's gotten to the point where Ukraine, as I mentioned this week in my reporting, has a dedicated module for last mile targeting. It basically takes a bunch of different factors. I don't know, for a little while I was working on a drone simulator in Unity. Mr. Gao played it a little bit, and that's definitely the case. That like it's pretty easy to get your drone up in the air and fly it around, but when you're actually trying to hit a target, that last little bit where you need to actually guide it in, that's the really tricky part, right? Because you have all these different variables happening. So having AI modules that assist doing that targeting is really vital. Another thing I didn't mention in my reporting this week, but it was mentioned quite a bit in the mainstream press, is Russia Russia deployed a new drone in Ukraine, a new Shahed drone or Garon drone. And it supposedly has new AI targeting and better cameras and things like that. So that is one area where Russia is continuing to increase production and innovate to a certain extent. I don't think that the innovation or the production numbers are quite matching what Ukraine has. But it's still happening, and it's still very deadly to Ukrainian forces and the Ukrainian economy. And that brings us, I think, to our next question, which is a good question. How is the Ukrainian economy doing? So it's not something we spend as much time on. Mainly, I think Stanimir just doesn't have as much time. He's very focused on the Russian economy. It takes a lot of effort to read all the regional news and aggregate all the numbers and things like that. So I don't think Mr. Stanimir himself has enough time to really dive into the Ukrainian economy. I, of course, am not an economy expert like Mr. Stanimir is, but I do, do my little news report every week, and I pick things up here and there. I overhear smart people in the room talking. So my general summary of the Ukrainian economy is the situation is, I would basically summarize it as really not good, but compared to Russia, better. So the reason I say that is the Ukrainian economy had the most problems right when the full-scale invasion started. So obviously it was in decent but not great shape from 2014 to 2022. But then the full-scale invasion started, and Ukraine lost a lot of territory and quite important industries. So a lot of coal mines, a lot of the steel industry was located in the east, And when Russia invaded and took over, 20 something percent of Ukrainian territory, of course, they lost all of that economic productivity. So that immediately put a huge dent in the Ukrainian economy that would take them years of natural growth to recover right off the bat. Then on top of that, you have Russian strikes on Ukrainian power facilities. The power facilities, I think, are the biggest detriment. As far as I know, Russia has attempted to strike certain like Ukrainian industries and things like that. But the two main areas where Russia has really hurt the Ukrainian economy are in power generation and logistics. So in power generation, they've managed to, I would say this year has been a better year for Ukraine's power situation. I think it's because they're importing stuff from the EU. And it's obviously hard for Russia to strike and destroy that stuff. But generally speaking, when you talk to Ukrainians on the ground, sometimes for hours in a day, like let's say that there's a supermarket, the power gets taken out. They have to run on generators to keep all that stuff from, the refrigeration from stopping and all the food from spoiling. So it has a huge impact on Ukrainian business to have these power outages, these frequent power outages. So basically, like, the Ukrainian economy is not in great shape. Like, that's just the reality of it. That being said, they're not eating into the bone of their economy in the way that the Russians are. The Russians have genuinely adopted a full wartime footing. Ukraine has, but they don't have the same model. The Ukrainian model relies on, I would say, the private economy to like innovate and fill gaps in ways that the Russian economy just isn't capable of. So the Ukrainian economy, I would say, has mostly successfully diverted as many funds as they can into military spending, but they haven't like compromised spending in other areas. In fact, I would say that they probably should be putting a little more into military. If like one of the criticisms that Zelenskyy's leadership has, or like Zelenskyy's cabinet or whatever you want to say, not Zelenskyy himself, although he is partly, he is the final decision maker on these matters. But generally, I would say it's viewed that Zelenskyy's party is not making the economic sacrifices necessary in order to win. Like, they should have drafted more people. They should have, mobilized more resources, things like that. There's a lot of Ukrainians who like firmly believe that. And also at the local level, you get sometimes protests in Ukraine that like you see, it's very common for Ukrainian municipal governments to like Russians will strike something and the Ukrainians will clean it up like immediately. They're very good about like cleaning up damage to places. And you can see a lot of like photo montages of like before and after in Ukraine. But sometimes you get actual protests by Ukrainians who are like, let's not repave the sidewalk right now. Let's give some more money to the defense forces, right? So there's a little bit of dispute about how certain money is spent, and that maybe some of that money should be redirected even more into military. But generally speaking, the Ukrainians haven't eaten into their economic bones in the same way that Russia has, where basic services are failing and things like that. And quite frankly, a lot of that can be attributed to direct investment by Ukraine's allies and partners. The fact that Ukraine's allies and partners, including like countries that are giving money to Ukraine bilaterally, this has included the US, Germany, lots of countries in Europe, the EU, et cetera, they've directly funded Ukrainian budget items. And so that has really helped Ukraine maintain a lot of functionality in places where they would otherwise have to just sacrifice it. And the other thing is that they've been pretty responsible about like how they've allocated their military stuff. They've managed to, I would say, not waste resources, a lot of resources. Probably the biggest challenge that they have is like the logistics of they've got like 5 missile programs cooking. They've got to maintain like all this crazy Western equipment. That's probably the biggest inefficiency in their military allocation. But even that being said, like my point is they've set up a lot of systems in place. Like they have a bidding system, a public bidding system for military procurement and things like that, to where you don't see a lot of like waste and black holes like you do in the Russian military. There's a lot of cases in the Russian military where they spend billions and billions of dollars, and then at the end result is like kind of questionable. I don't think you really see that as much in the Ukrainian military. Obviously, there are failed projects and redundancies and things, but usually when the Ukraine sets its mind to something, they're able to accomplish it. So all of that, I would say in summary, is like the Ukrainian economy is not doing well. It's a really dark picture in terms of just if you compare it to any peacetime economy, it's real bad. That being said, if you compare it directly to the Russian economy, both in terms of the raw numbers and in terms of like the general like traits of the economy, it's a more dynamic, it's a more flexible economy, and it's being brought to bear more efficiently on the war effort than the Russian economy. That being said, Russia has more resources. So the longer this drags out, in theory, Russia should be able to sort through some of those deficiencies and do something. But that comes down, I guess, to management and political stability and policy, which Stanimir would know more about. Stanimir, did you want to say anything about the Ukrainian economy, or not something you really follow that much?
I just don't have the time to follow it that much, sadly.
Yeah, understandable. So Mr. Gao, anything you want to say about the Ukrainian economy?
No.
I would say Germany is very one of the key partners that has kept the Ukrainian economy really doing well. One key program, losing the U.S. support was a pretty big deal. Like the U.S. did directly support the Ukrainian budget and was directly in 2024 and 2023 contributing to repairing Ukrainian power infrastructure. And that was a really big deal. But now Germany, I would say, is one of the main sponsors of the Ukrainian budget and repairing Ukrainian infrastructure. So I don't know. That's a very key aspect of Germany's support moving forward.
I mean, Germany is probably, when you look at everything, one of the key providers, right? But there are other countries doing actually a lot, and maybe even more than Germany, because financial assistance is not our main thing, to be honest. I mean, when you just look at bilateral assistance, it's really not that much. But when you, of course, include EU stuff, then billions come on top of that. I mean, when we're speaking about non-lethal aid, I believe it was 25.7%, I believe, of every euro which comes from the European Union. And but if you just count the bilateral assistance, it's really not that much in terms of financial assistance. There are other countries like Japan, for example, if I recall correctly, which don't provide any military assistance and therefore completely focus on financial and humanitarian aid, which provide, I think, more than we do.
Yeah, Japan is, I would say, one of the primary financial contributors outside of, again, like the U.S. isn't contributing more, but if you add up everything over the last, since the start of the full-scale invasion, the U.S. has been a pretty significant contributor. But yeah, I'd have to look at the raw numbers, but you're absolutely right to say that there are other countries that are really pulling weight in that field in particular. But I would just say, like, don't sell Germany short. Like, there is a lot of stuff that happens, I would say, at the local level. Like you cover a lot of that, where like, they'll send fire trucks, they'll send medical equipment, and there's a lot of like bilateral, like city to city and region to region partnerships between Germany and Ukraine that I think help fill a lot of minor gaps in municipal budgets and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, just in terms of financial stuff, I talked in my news segment that the German government is funding a new grant program for Ukrainian businesses with up to $20,000 for creating new jobs for the Ukrainian economy. Stuff like this, or of course, the city partnerships are really, really huge here in Germany. I'm really curious to see if that also refers to other countries. I mean, not Germany and other countries, but other countries and Ukraine. Because I'm, of course, following a lot of oblasts and municipals and cities and towns and whatever on Telegram and other sources to see what German cities are donating. And to be honest, I see a couple of times Polish and sometimes once maybe every 2 weeks or so French city. Japan is often part of these press releases or these statements, posts, whatever. But I'm really not seeing a lot of other countries, the Baltics, once every week or whatever. But it's would be interesting to know how other countries are involved in these city partnerships.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of that stuff at the private level. There's a couple of organizations in northern countries like Norway, Sweden, that, for example, there are firefighters in Norway that got together and said, let's go to all the fire departments. And, let's say every 5-10 years, the fire departments in these countries, they sell their old fire truck, they get a new fire truck. So they all have top of the line equipment. And they are saying, instead of selling it, donate it to Ukraine, donate the old fire truck to Ukraine. And then they collect a little gas and money and medical supplies and things like that. And they bring it down, or other firefighting supplies, and they bring it down to Ukraine. Same for ambulances and things like that. But again, these are private charities that do this. It's not usually done at a municipal government level that I'm aware of in other countries. So I think Germany's a little unique in that regard, but you're probably right that there are other countries doing it and we just don't know about it as much.
Yeah.
Cool. So next question is, if Iran goes down, Venezuela may stumble too. So just Venezuela, Russia stuff. Yeah, I mean, Russia and Venezuela have some strategic partnerships. I think it resembles a lot of what Russia and Iran have together, which is when it comes down to it, they're not actually going to help each other. They're not really allies in the traditional sense, but they're kind of aligned in certain goals. I think it's Ann Applebaum, Autocracy Inc., right? The idea that there is a group of countries that are aligned against the current open, democratic world order. And Venezuela, I would say, would count itself as part of that group. Russia, therefore, feels that it has an interest in supporting that. And Russia and China have pretty extensive influence in Venezuela. So it would be a good thing for the current Venezuelan government to collapse. I personally know some Venezuelans, and they hate the current government. They think it's really ruined their country, basically. So I think it would be a good thing for the Venezuelan people for them to not have a crappy, unaccountable autocracy ruining their country. But that's just my opinion. I'm not an expert on Venezuelan politics. I'm sure America did terrible things and blah blah blah. So it is what it is. But I personally hope that Venezuela has a more democratic government and they can do what they want. They don't have to be our friends. Anyway, anything you want to say about Venezuela terminate to Ukraine?
No, not really.
I
No.
don't think so. Cool. Then I think this is a good question from Matthew Whitmore. How do we know, Mr. Standemir, that the Russians are being even close to honest when disclosing the performance of their economy?
Well, for one, because they still haven't classified their internal macroeconomic forecasting center, and it's saying the same things, and it's run by none other than the brother of the defense minister. Russia still has enough of a culture of releasing economic news and releasing statistics. And it's different to criticize politics in Russia than to criticize economics and to provide straight reporting about economics and business matters. So that still is happening. They still have sources, even though these big outlets like Kommersant, RBK, and Vedomsti, they're still controlled by oligarchs, but they're still expected to provide good criticism of the economy. And that's why we still get relatively good data. And also because sometimes people can't get directly to Putin, like ministers can't get into the Kremlin or to see him sometimes they use like the St. Peter's Economics forums to actually air out their grievances and speak about the problems they're facing. And again, this is for a domestic crowd. We just have still untapped access to those things. Now, when it comes to their statistics, I would call them massaged, but that's why I'm comparing like to like, what it was the previous year versus this year. And what it was last year was a lot better than this year for some sectors. And what we see last year was that there was growth and there was also record results in some sectors. And now we're seeing the opposite. So that's why we know that the data also matches what we're seeing on the ground, even if percentage-wise the data isn't completely accurate because they might overstate things.
Yeah, I think all those are great points. I would just add maybe that, like kind of similar to what you said, there is a distinction, I would say, in the Russian political culture right now of like technical information and criticism that's aimed toward a technical audience, and like more general like public rabble rousing or whatever you want to call it. Like, for example, if you release a very detailed technical discussion meant for the consumption of, you know, industry professionals or whatever, and you said in so many technical words that the economy is doing badly, as long as you're not like going around on widely available mass media public forums and dumbing it down for the plebs, like you can still have kind of insightful political or economic analysis as long as you know what areas not to touch in particular, right? So I think that's like something that it's the Russian culture is starting to like close and implode on itself. Like, I don't think this will last forever, but as Stanimir said, for now, like they do have a culture that's capable of technical analysis that even like still somewhat reflects reality. They occasionally will massage things to, you know, stroke their ego a bit, but overall they're still able to somewhat have a picture of reality if for people who are willing to look. I don't know. Would you agree, Samir?
Yes, and throughout Putin's reign, there has been the idea that the big economic newspapers and outlets have that job to actually criticize things and to provide critical input on what's happening and to do exposés and find things out in the economy. And that is a net good for the Russian economy versus the problems that it showcases sometimes that the ministries are incapable of actually running their sectors.
Gotcha. And I think someone wanted to ask about, you mentioned Russia buying debt. Who's buying the bonds? I think you mentioned like big Russian companies. Do you want to say anything else about the bonds?
Well, big Russian banks. And maybe we can also lump with them the big Russian pension funds, which are usually run by big Russian banks because they're linked financial institutions. Because if your inflation is at 10% and the state bond gives you 15%, that's an easy way to have growth above inflation for your pension portfolio. And similarly for the banks. But the banks also have to rely, when it comes to the big banks, they have a liquidity issue despite having record profits. Like, for instance, in May, they had 250 billion in profits. But the banks still need repo deals from the central bank, which is used to basically redistribute the money that is from the small banks on deposit in the central bank and provide liquidity to the large banks. And usually that's also another way they can sustain this purchase of Russian bonds.
Thank you, Stanimir. So yeah, we got some other, I don't know, I'm trying to like think. I don't have good answers for most of these. Are we going to get more crazy economy posts, or are they just getting reversed? I'm not sure what the reversed part means, but I think we're going to get more crazy economy posts. Like, the Russian economy is not getting more rational. It's getting crazier. I think as we already mentioned, they're sort of demanding that these they obviously they need microelectronics, and it's not good that this company went bankrupt, right? But they just let it happen because that's just the way that their system works, and they're going to get absorbed by a big state entity that's kind of too big to fail, and they're never going to be able to make profitable microelectronics. So I think that's just the general story. But I don't know, Stanimir, do you think it's going to get crazier, or do you think we're going to see the same level of crazy for the foreseeable future?
Well, I would say that, let's say, for Q1 2025, KAMAZ, which is Russia's biggest truck maker, had a bigger loss than its profit in 2023. So we're going to get crazier. We're going to get things where these companies, their debt balloons 4 or 5 times in a matter of 2 or 3 years. So it's going to get worse from here on out.
Yeah, I would agree. Next question. Fishing line dangling into the rotors of drones was in the news kind of recently. I'm not aware of that specific technique, but there's lots of different ways that they're trying to counter drones. Lots of different techniques. Both countries have standardized shotguns for counter drone stuff. They both have like a standard issue shotgun for their infantry units now. Both countries have tried like crazy net stuff where they like launch nets in the air to stop drones. I'm not sure how you would do the fishing line thing, but I would imagine it's something similar. You kind of launch fishing line, you try to tangle up the rotors. So it's definitely a viable system. Like nets are a big part of like first line drone defense, and that's basically what they do. They tangle up the rotors of the drones and keep the explosives from getting in where it matters. So. Has anyone seen anything about this fishing line thing?
Nope.
Yeah, we'll try to look into it in more detail with our drone people. This is a question for Stanimir as well. I think this is the last question. If the economy in the backwater regions of Russia get hard by this economic slowdown, will that drive more Russians to signing contracts with the army?
Kind of yes and no, because if it was driving people at such a rate, we would see the regions empty out much faster. Generally, people in Russia still prefer to sometimes work for 20,000 rubles rather than sign up for the armed forces. If the economy gets hit, also the other thing is, can the Russian army actually handle an intake of, let's say, 50 to 100,000 people a month? And can they sustain that? Because that's also the economy of the regions, which has to pay the sign-up bonuses. Maybe they'll also scream foul because they don't have the money to support such a big sign-up. I don't think it will drive it much further than right now, and I think you will have failures which will make the war less and less popular because the economy is struggling because of it.
Yep, I agree with all that. Maybe we just review a little bit the way that it currently works, right? So the federal government or Putin or the Kremlin or whatever, they set a recruitment goal. They look at all the regions and they kind of divide up, okay, you guys need to give us this many troops and you guys need to give us this many troops. And then the regional government basically sets up an incentive structure. We'll give you a car, we'll give you X number of rubles if you sign up. And then that's how they basically get people. As far as I know, right now, for most regions, at least for their region, the pay is pretty competitive. Obviously, if you're from Moscow and you sign up, your bonus is a lot better. But generally speaking, the bonuses and the financial incentives for joining are competitive with industry. But I would say the reputation of the huge risk of dying is one of the main reasons I would say people prefer civilian jobs over military. And it's, as Stanimir said, it relies on the regional governments keeping up these really lucrative incentive packages in order for the soldiers to feel like they're being compensated adequately. And right now, the compensation is already quite high. And I wouldn't say they're struggling, but they're not people aren't signing up in droves. Most people would rather work in the economy and make money rather than go join the meat waves, I would say. So yeah, that's kind of the general picture. It probably would lead more Russians to sign up for the economy, but in general, I don't think it's a big like factor. They have kind of a labor shortage in general. Most people would rather like earn money safely than earn it on the front lines. And the Russian economy is such that right now you can get a pretty lucrative job if you want it. So that's probably not going to change, even with like major changes in like the backwater economies. Stanimir, anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, if you're willing to work within Russia, you can find jobs that pay comparatively what the Russian military pays. They're not going to be great jobs. You're going to have to work, for example, 12-hour shifts 6 days a week, but you can find similar pay and on-the-job training. Not the sign-up bonus, that's rare, but you can find the rest. And some, for example, offer if you're willing to, let's say, move to Yakutia, you might get also an apartment just to sign up for that job to work in that region, which has a lack of labor, and people are usually moving away from it.
Yep. Yeah. So thanks, Stanimir. And I will make this the last question, I think, which is just the nets in general being used in cities. And it's surprising that we haven't seen like more net technology, I guess, used by both sides. Yeah, it's true. So from what we know, a lot of so apparently Denmark created some new regulations, like EU fishing regulations, a couple of years ago, and that as a result, they had a bunch of random like fishing nets laying around, and they basically donated all that to Ukraine, and Ukraine has been using that as the main source of netting. For example, in Kursk, we saw a couple of roads that the Ukrainians just covered completely in nets, like made net tunnels. And all of that probably was that Danish fishing net. So far, both sides have adopted that approach. They've like repurposed existing like surplus netting that they have for various stuff. Probably some of it's like agricultural, like the stuff they bag like fruit in. Think civilian use dual purpose nets. They just get the hold of some of that stuff and they throw it up and basically does the job. That said, there's much like better materials, much stronger materials, lighter materials. Like you could make nets out of better stuff if you were really concerned about making them as effective as possible. But so far, neither side has decided that that's like worth the price, and I don't think they will. They're both sides are too resource strained to really, like, similar with the drone situation. Like they're gonna do their best to make do with the civilian parts because that stuff can be produced easily at scale at low cost. When you start getting more specialized materials to make nets out of and things like that, it's the costs goes up very quickly and the actual benefit doesn't go up as quickly, right? But I think in Western militaries, you'll probably see net technology advance, and probably, in countries like China, and like we'll probably see more passive counter drone measures in the future. And a lot of that has to do with the Operation Spiderweb, right, that Ukraine did recently in Russia, and just the general tenor of what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. I think both sides are really being devastated by these drone strikes, and countries are taking notice, and they're realizing that their critical infrastructure isn't super protected from drones. And so we'll probably see more nets going up around, different developed countries, and we'll probably see other, passive drone countermeasures in the future, and they'll probably be more sophisticated than throwing up some old fishing line. But I think for the purposes of the Russia invasion of Ukraine, we're probably going to see mostly like adapted, like nets from fishing line and stuff like that. Mr. Germanade, anything you want to say about nets or fishing line stuff? Sorry, not fishing line, net technology.
No, absolutely not. But you forgot one question.
What's that?
Yeah, from Oimbubi. At Tochnyi, what is... Okay, let me show the question first. What is the first economy inside Russia which will be for the most? which will be
Cool.
for the
Probably
most.
planes, right, Stanimir?
Airlines will take several years to use up the resource of the Western engines they have. So not as quickly as you expect. For me, it's the automotive industry. It's crashing. There's no other way to say it. We see the production output in the statistics down by 27%. That's significant. And it's not as bad as it's going to get by the end of the year.
Poor Lada. Well, there you have it. It looks like the first sector of the Russian economy that will fall, according to Mr. Stanimir, is the car industry, or the automotive industry in general. So we will wait with bated breath for the Russian automotive industry to collapse. Cool. So any final questions, Mr. Germanade?
Not that I know. Not that I see.
Cool. Well, I guess we will go ahead and wrap up the stream. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Of course, Mr. Germanade always asks me to thank myself.
Yes.
My father always says, too, you should tell him who you are. You never say, you should say, I'm Joseph Thomason, and this is the news. So I'm Joseph Thomason. Thank you to me for doing this. It's my birthday today, by the way. So happy birthday.
Wait, you're telling me this now?
Yeah, I'm telling you right now. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it. But yeah, thank you, birthday boy, me for doing all this. No, but in all seriousness, thank you to our panel. Thanks to Stanimir. Thanks to Germany, to Ukraine. It's always good to broadcast with these guys. They're really experts in their field. They know their stuff. They know, unlike me, they know when not to talk about things. They know when they don't know things. Whereas I don't. I just talk and talk to hear myself talk and hear how smart I sound. So yeah, thank you to their great expertise. Really appreciate it. Really appreciate talking to them and asking the questions about stuff that they know lots about every week. And thank you, of course, to our excellent chat. We appreciate you guys tuning in live and asking all your great questions. We get a lot of feedback from you guys about what you want to know more about. So it's always useful. Someone asked, how old am I? I'm 37 years old.
50.
I'm 59 years old. No, I'm 37, almost 40. Good Lord. Yep. I never thought I always saw older people were like hated their birthday, and I was like, I'm always gonna love my birthday. But now I'm an old man, and I'm like, I don't want to be older. This sucks. I hate my birthday. But yeah, 37. Anyway, thank you to our live chat. Thanks for you guys' questions. We always appreciate your questions. It's always interesting for us to get a little back and forth going rather than just talking at you for 2 hours. So that's why we do this thing live. We like your questions. Thanks always to also our audience that tunes in for the video on demand. We know not everyone can tune in live, so we appreciate that. You're more than welcome to throw up any questions you want in the comments. We'll read them. We'll do our best maybe next week or whatever to answer them. So yeah, thanks to everyone for tuning in, and we'll see everyone next week, same time, 2100 Kyiv time on Sunday. Slava Ukraini.
Slava.
On behalf of the brave.